So I think we've made the point as to why research literacy is necessary as a practitioner. But why is research important? Why is research important for evidence informed practice? Let's think of a hypothetical situation. Assume that you are the program director for a community health center. A senior wellness advocacy group approaches you to find out the best ways for encouraging older adults to adhere to prescribed diet and activity regimens to help prevent or manage lifestyle associated chronic diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, and obesity. So the question is, what are your next steps? While you're thinking about that question at leisure, this will create some context for you to frame your response in and perhaps think about it a little more deeply. So we move on to section 1.4 in your textbook that talks about definitions and history. The concept of research literacy is evolving. As we discussed earlier, we're living in an era of abundant information. Your textbook likens it to a knowledge explosion, and the focus of using research to health and community practice is often referred to an evidence informed practice model, which requires you, the practitioner, to acquire the most proven method. What that means in your line of care is your decisions must be based on successful, demonstrated techniques that are relevant to your immediate context. Let's make this a little more tangible for you. You, my dear sir or madam, are a healthcare support worker working at a long-term care home. You notice that many older adults don't drink all the water that they're provided, leaving their cups half full or even more full. So these feeder cups are on their tables. You talk about this with your supervisor, and you both decide that you are going to go through academic literature concerning fluid balance in older people. What you find out from your studies are that older people simply do not drink enough. They don't perceive thirst quite as efficiently as younger people. At the same time, you recognize that fluid balance is critical in maintaining good health. So you set about making some changes after doing a brief survey to see how many older adults left their water. After your survey, you have a discussion with the care team, and the decision you make is to incorporate more liquids in tea, soup, or juice. Once this is decided, you repeat the survey again 2 weeks later, and you assess your older adults, your older residents for hydration to determine whether your method has been a success or not. So research literacy is considered an essential competency for evidence-informed practice. In box 1.1 of your textbook titled Definitions and History Research Literacy, the authors state that to you. Think about the example regarding hydration. You located, understood, and perhaps critically evaluated evidence for application in practice. That is exactly the definition of research literacy. So the ability to locate, understand, and critically evaluate evidence for application in practice, that is the definition of research literacy. You have to realize that this section, as written in the textbook, isn't laid out chronologically as one may expect a section that states history. It does allude to the fact that there are several factors that have influenced the shaping of literacy, and it gives a timestamp to different lines of evidence that have followed. One thing that we all have to understand, and this is in box 1.1 as well of your textbook, is that research literacy is simply a component of a much larger concept called research mindedness. There are several characteristics of being research minded, and as practitioners, we have to be research literate, but we also have to be research minded. A research minded individual comprehends the significance and relationship of research to practice. Your abilities as a research-minded person will allow you to draw on research to inform your own practice. As a research-minded person, you will be aware of various research approaches and strategies. Your ability to appreciate the strengths and limitations of different research methods only improve as you get more and more research-minded. As a research-minded person, you can critically appraise research findings and literature. There are several steps that are instrumental to research literacy. To be able to be research literate in order to help your practice, you have to be able to formulate researchable questions, which means the question has to be focused, narrow, well-defined, something that you can search. In order to be research literate, you have to be comfortable accessing information from multiple sources. You have to be able to sift through a lot of information, making decisions as to which information constitutes evidence that's relevant to you. You have to critically evaluate and synthesize evidence. And when we talk about synthesizing evidence in the context of research literacy, we're not asking you to do experiments. The idea is that you will use the existing information found through research to generate a model for practice for yourself. As a research literate person, you will need to be able to interpret evidence to make clinical judgments, or in your care judgments. Part of being research literate is also being able to talk about the research in an educated manner with your colleagues, with your residents, with community groups. Being research literate means that you understand ethics well, you understand responsibilities, and you understand compassionate standards of practice, which means just because something looks good on the surface as evidence does not mean it is directly applicable in your line of work. Being research literate requires you to reflect on your practice from multiple perspectives, and sometimes that might require you to discuss with other professionals as to how they see your perceived use of best evidence-informed practice. Being research literate requires you to participate, and this is very important. You cannot be research literate if you do not discuss your findings and your learnings with other professionals and peers. Research literacy enables you to do a lot of different things. It allows you to be conversant in the process of evidence-informed decision making. You're very comfortable in using evidence to change or make new decisions. It allows you to communicate better with other professionals, other clients, with your older adults that you're working with. It allows you to remain current. It allows you to reflect on your existing practice. It allows you to be critical of your practice or the practice that you've observed somewhere else and respond in a logical and sensible manner to that difference. Research literacy lets you make the best possible choices to provide the best possible care or intervention to your care recipients. It makes you be a better consumer and an advocate of the best use of healthcare resources. So, the evidence-informed decision-making process is cyclical. So if you look at figure 1.1 in the evidence-informed decision-making process model, the first step of the challenge is to actually define or articulate your difficulty or your problem as clearly and as researchably as possible. Think about the hydration challenge that we discussed. You were able to define the problem well, and hence you could go and look. The next step in this process is to search. And search could be search or research, and you could use a regular search engine, or you could use a database specific to your needs. Regardless, you're looking for new information. Typically, the result of a search will lead to a lot of material to read. So then you have to make an appraisal, which means this step involves sifting and sorting through a lot of material and making decisions on what to use and what to discard. Once you've appraised the information, the next step is to go ahead and synthesize. This means you're creating new knowledge for yourself and your team. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing experiments, but this process is considered synthesis. Once you have created new knowledge, you've synthesized information, it's one thing to do that, and an entirely different thing to apply it. You may need to ensure that you're not contravening regulatory guidelines. You may need permission or supervisory oversight to put your plan into play. The evidence-based information that you discovered may need to be tweaked or adapted before you can go to the next step, which is implementation. Let's assume everything went well with your plan and now you have implemented what you need to do. Yay! Now your plan is, with or without tweaks, is in play. And this is it, right? We're done. Nope. You aren't, because once you implement all of your solutions, you've done the hard work identifying the problem, doing the research, creating information, tweaking the practice, and now putting it into place, you still have to determine if it works. This is where the next step comes in, where you evaluate your intervention. Perhaps your intervention is great, it's fantastic. However, no matter what intervention you have, it will get outdated in time. So perhaps in 5 years, there might be better ways to accomplish exactly the same goals that you set to achieve. So maybe it is time to go back to redefining the problem, redefining an improvement to your solution, and you go through the process. And that's why this becomes a cyclical process. So go ahead and read the section from your textbook. The next section that we will be talking about will be how to use this textbook well, what are the objectives, how to use the modules well, what are the objectives, and what are the roles for the chapter summaries provided at the end.